I almost killed myself several times. And it finally, like, I woke up finally and realized, like, oh, if I keep living this way, I'm not going to survive a year. Like, I'll be dead within a year. And it was just so matter of fact to me that it kind of scared me straight. And I remember it was like late at night, and I'll never forget the moment of transformation for me, sitting on the kind of the foot of my bed. And I was like in the middle of the night, it's probably like 3 or 4 in the morning, thinking, I'm here to live for something more. And if I don't like radically change my life now, I'm probably not going to be around in a year. And then I waited until the sun came up, and I called a friend, and I moved out. Went back to my parents for a few months before I ended up moving to Boulder to study with my first mentor, because I realized I just had to get out of the environment I was in. Otherwise, I wasn't going to really make a change or a difference. I needed to change my influence. And that was where I started, was really just like, man, I need to figure out how to find happiness and a sense of peace and fulfillment for myself. And how do I make life work? Because if I don't, and I keep doing what I'm doing, it's just going to go really bad. And that was where it kind of all started, was out of the necessity of like, man, I am in a lot of pain. I don't understand how to make myself in this world work the way that it should, and I need to find answers. And that was pretty much what like motivated everything.
That is such a unique outcome, because I mean, it's crazy. You went from I want to not live to immediately going to the under the and end of the spectrum and going, not only do I need to live, but I need to find answers. Like, what was it that you had? Like, what was it about like that moment that made you just change? It was, I mean, that's like a whiplash moment. Like, I want to kill myself. To not only do I want to live, but I want to like, I need to have solutions. I need to like be on a journey.
Well, it's like I think that it was kind of twofold. I looked at these people that I really did love and care about, like my best friend that I was living with, and my parents, and my family, and individuals in my space. And I just realized just how much suffering, like, sure, I was in, but just everybody around me was in. And there's like an inner knowing that it could be very different. Like, it did not have to look as dark as it did, and the struggle that I was in, and that just about everybody I knew and cared about, like, that they were in, that I just inherently knew it didn't have to be that way. And I saw like examples of people sort of in the world on TV or whatever, living really aspirational lives and up to things. And I remembered when I was younger, wanting to live a great life, and wanting to do something, or like maybe build the business, or like having these ideas of aspiration that just disappeared, right? And for some reason, when I finally realized sort of how far I had dropped, and the negative impacts I was having on people, and the pain I was causing the people that I loved and I cared about, it just became unacceptable to continue that journey of propagating dysfunction and suffering. And then on the other side, it was like this faint whisper of like, it's all possible. Like, whatever it is that you want to aspire to, even though I didn't quite know what it is I wanted at the time, it was just like this whisper in the back of my mind that it's all possible. And for whatever reason in that moment, I just was like, great, that's what we're going to do. And I started with just a simple intention, a vision of like, what do I do to find inner peace, inner fulfillment, and a sense of joy? Like, what do I need to do to find that? Because it didn't start with like, I want to build a company or make a lot of money, or any of that, or influence people's lives. It was like, oh, how do I find inner peace and fulfillment and happiness? Because I kind of like felt like if I had that, the rest I could figure out and would work out. But if I didn't have that, I was going to continue sort of this destructive nature and habit I was up to.
How did you avoid the shame judgment? I mean, think about it. You go to college. I mean, like I remember distinctly, it's like you're going to go to college. And if you didn't go to college, I mean, I dropped out halfway through my junior year, and it took me probably, geez, better part of 5 to 10 years to like avoid what felt to me like the stigma of like, oh, you left. Oh, you didn't make it in the conventional world. So how did you avoid that shame or judgment that comes with doing the unconventional?
It's interesting, like I felt some shame and insecurity about it later, but at the time I ended up kind of like meeting this mentor that I had initially. And I met him because he was like a keynote speaker at this event that I attended, and I kind of waited for him after his talk, and I was like, all right, like, I think the things you're saying make sense. And like, how do I apply this? I was like, I need to like leverage this in order to change my life and my circumstances. I told him a little bit about where I was, what was going on, and I was ready to throw myself into something. And we kind of talked after that for a few months, and he realized like how committed I was, and he extended an invitation. He's like, "Why don't you move out to Boulder and what he called like be a living student with me, and I'll teach you for a year. I'll train you for a year, and then we'll kind of see where we go from there." And so I had that option, or offered to me. And this was after I kind of dropped out of my second semester, and I was thinking, do I go back to school? And this thing was offered to me, and I was like, I just knew I had to do it, and that it was going to get me out of the environment I was in, which was necessary to create something different. And I remember thinking to myself, like, I don't know if this works out. I kind of think this guy may not be totally stable. He could be crazy, right? Um, but it's different than anything I've known. And so at least it presents the possibility of something different. Whereas everything that I'm doing right now, I know, and it's not going to give me access to anything different. And so I just went all in. And I remember I went and I told my parents, like, hey, I'm going to go move in with this guy. I'm going to do this thing that he's calling the healing path. He's going to train me for a year. And my parents freaked out. I'll never forget. My mom, there was a lot of profanity. She's like, you are going to college. You are going back to school. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. And she was like, the fire was there. And I was like, well, I understand you're disappointed, but I'm doing this. And she just was like so upset. And then I went downstairs. I was like, let's pull the band-aid off. I went right downstairs after that, where my dad was like on the computer, and I told him the whole spiel. And I remember he took a deep breath and he's like, well, if it doesn't work out in the next 6 months or a year, I guess you can always go back to school. And like, he just kind of knew my nature, because he knew like the more he argued with me, the more I was going to do the opposite. So that was like all he said. And then he just went silent and just like went back to what he's doing on the computer in like utter disappointment. Right. And I remember just thinking to myself, like, I just have to do this, right? There's this intuitive knowing that this was the thing that was going to get me moving in the direction of something different than I knew, even though I didn't really know what that direction was going to be. And the kind of pain I was in, I really didn't care about people's disappointment, right? It was like, I just need to find a way out of this. And I know that there's nothing in my current reality that even has the possibility of that.
Yeah, well, I want to keep going down this storyline, but where do you feel like that pain came from? I mean, at the time, what did you think that it came from? And maybe like now that you've obviously had time to let it like marinate, where was that pain coming from?
For me, it's just my environment. It was what I learned. It's like, I just took on the dysfunction of my environment. And so like my household, there's a lot of anger, a lot of screaming, a lot of yelling, pretty, my brothers just, were relentless with me. Like I got beat up from a young age, growing up pretty much my whole life. I went to, it was called Sombra del Monte Elementary School. So there was a lot of, kids of a different ethnicity than me. And I was different. So, I ran a lot at recess, and got bullied at school a lot and all this kind of stuff. So like my environment was like constant turmoil, and I remember, coming home from school relatively young, like as early as like maybe sixth grade, to an empty house because both the parents worked and were trying to figure out how to put food on the table. And it's like, I'm like making my own meals and trying to, take care of myself and my little sister, and that kind of thing. Cause, it was the two of us. And I was like, I was alone, I was kind of on my own a bit more than I think most. And, when you're kind of on your own at those ages and you don't have a lot of direction on like, how do you do things? Like, how do you get along at school, and how do you interact with other people, and all this kind of stuff? When you don't have any of that, life is hard, right? And you're kind of forced to copy what you see around you, or just kind of figure it out. And there's some extreme, kind of dysfunction going on in my house and with my family, and like heavy alcoholism, and a lot of my family, spent quite a bit of time in prison, or I have family members who have died, not naturally, but because of the kind of lifestyle and the things that they were doing. My nephew died because he was, shot to death, and things like this. So it's like my environment set me up to suffer, and I didn't have a lot in my environment to show me a different way.
Well, I mean, that's really powerful, Joey. Thank you for sharing that. Well, I think the thing that I love about you sharing that story is that when someone hears your success, right? No, and people who know you, right? They see the success, right? You're helping tens of thousands of people. I mean, those are only the ones that like you actually can account for. I mean, that doesn't count anything that someone's heard you speak, they've listened to you on a podcast, read anything that you've written, right, or just even the ripple effects from there. That they must think, well, he came from a really great background. He must have just had like the gold spoon. And at the end of the day, is that flowers can grow anywhere. My initial thought was like you're like the Harry Potter story, right? You're underneath like you're underneath the steps, right? And then all of a sudden it's like you go, no, there's something here, and then you go down this journey of the 1 year of the healing path with the mentor. You go, is this real? Is this like am I going to meet an untimely end here? Keep going down that road.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, and to your point, it's like I tell people often, I go like, listen, I didn't start off doing well. I crawled out of the ditch, you know. And I think it's part of what drives my passion to serve people today and give people access, as many people access as I can to world-class training and support and education, regardless of their circumstances, is because it's like what I realize is, back then I had a desire show up to want to see my reality different. And I think that that doesn't always happen for people, because a lot of people, what I see is like their circumstances are really challenging. It's difficult, whether it's extreme, kind of like my beginning was, or it's not as extreme. We just want to access a different level of life, like whatever. It's like we like to think that like, oh, when people hit this thing called like a rock bottom, then they're going to transform. And honestly, like what I've seen doing this work for the last 22 years or so is like a lot of times that never occurs for people. Like they never find that bottom, and they never have that desire to go, wow, I have to do something different. I'm going to change my reality. Like a lot of individuals just ride out that which is familiar and that which they know, regardless of what that looks like. But then it's like when you do have people who have a desire, I see so many people where it's like, man, I want to change my life. I want to create a difference. I want to move beyond where I am, but they don't have access to something to leverage. They don't have access to a mentor. They don't have access to tools, techniques, strategies, like a system that can really support them to go where they want to go and become who they want to become. And so it's like, man, they might have all the desire in the world, but if they don't have access to a vehicle to take them there, and I learned this going to third world countries and doing, different service projects where it's like, man, they might want to change, but they kind of don't have the option because they don't have the vehicle. And so it's like I woke up one day and I was like, man, I need to do something different. And then in that moment, pretty quickly after, I was presented a vehicle that was like, hey, here's something you can leverage, and here's something you can, take or embody or work and learn, and it will better your circumstances. And all you got to do is be willing to put the effort into it. And so it's like so much of that, like those two things, like the willingness to create a change and then understanding that we need a vehicle, those two things came together for me at a time, which made everything possible for me today. And so it's like, man, I just want people to understand that if you have those two things, you're unstoppable.
Like what makes it so hard to find like that they even could even have a possibility of change?
I think it's so often people just get beat down, and sometimes that can happen relatively young, right? And like 15 years old, depending on your environment, your circumstance, your reinforcement. And sometimes it kind of slowly kind of gets in there over time for people, and then it kind of really hits them when they're in their 20s or 30s or 40s or 50s, where they have this event happen or something like this, where it's like this like hope and belief is diminished. And once somebody like stops hoping for something to be different, right, stops having the faith that it can be different, and then all of a sudden there's no longer the belief that things will change. It's like once that kind of dies, it's like people just ride stuff out, right, regardless, even if their circumstances are really painful. Like circumstances could be really bad, but it's familiar, and if it's familiar to us, we kind of have a sense of like security and safety in the known. And if we just sort of, accept like this is where it's going to be for me, even though you have opportunities presented to you, it's like the desire dies. Whereas if you can reignite that belief, or like the individuals who, even though their circumstances might be what they are or challenging, if inside themselves somewhere they hold this little whisper of like, oh, it could be different. Like even if it's just a faint sense of hope and belief, that they can become someone different or they can create a different life than they know, like that can be fanned and that can turn into something really fast. But if that kind of like flame dies out, then it's really hard to ignite it. But if it's even there just a little bit or faint in just the like smallest way, if the right opportunity is presented, it can just like explode into something amazing. And it's interesting because what I've discovered, like with myself and also working with people, is like a lot of times people think of belief as like something that's like either there, it's inherently something that's there for me, or it's not. And what I find is like belief is actually something that we decide we're going to have or not. It's like, oh, I'm going to believe that something's possible, even though I have no evidence in front of me saying that it is. But I'm just going to believe because I've decided to believe. And so belief is more of a decision than it is something that's inherently there or not there. And I think that if people understand that distinction, it changes the game.
Well, I love your articulation of deciding. It to one of our other guests we had on, Carrie Oberbrunner, talked about if you look at the etymology of like the word decide means to kill off, like to end. And so what I love is that it's the making that commitment of that there is no other alternative, like that this is not something that you can go back on. And I'm distinctly where, Joey, as I'm listening to, we're talking about like down the dumps, like, hey, you know what, like, extreme alcoholism, like prison. But I think that this is also prevalent in people who you think might actually be really successful. And I see this in entrepreneurs, right? Where they've built a life, they built a lifestyle, they've built like a certain level of like income where they become a prisoner of their own success. And it's almost even worse because it's they have all of these societal ego, familial sort of obligations. Can you talk a little bit about how you've seen that play out? Because from where you started to now, you're working with like high level athletes, like high functioning elite like entrepreneurs. How do you see that play out in that level?
Today, like my organization, like we train people literally from every walk of life, right? We can kind of support people in every circumstance. And most of the people that I train personally today, one-on-one, et cetera, either, like entrepreneurs or, top level executives at like Google or VMware or, something like that. Or like a pro athlete, as you're saying. And it's interesting because what I've come to realize early on, but especially today more than ever, is it's like kind of to your point. Matter of fact, I just spoke with somebody earlier today who worked at a very, very high level company, a Deloitte type company, was very, very successful, right? And he was had to take basically personal time off because he was having mental breakdowns, right? And a lot of people don't talk about this, but like it's actually pretty high level where executives today, high level of executives at Fortune 100, 500 companies, they're in a boardroom and they're having a meeting, and the stress and their health has declined so much that they're having heart attacks in the middle of meetings and getting kind of carried off to the hospital. And people at these bigger companies have problems with like suicide, where people are committing suicide at the company, like jumping out of the window of the big buildings and stuff like this. And these are individuals who are super successful, have big companies, family, kids, who seem healthy. And like from the outside, everything looks awesome. But it's like if we don't understand how to train and nurture our inner reality, we basically have a really beautiful prison. And that's kind of how I got my start. Actually, it was like my first clients when I was 20 years old, which was kind of radical. Like in my early 20s, I had a psychologist start referring me her clients, and they just happened to be like high profile clients in like Beverly Hills and Bel Air. And that's where she was. That's where she grew up, was Middle Hollywood. And she moved me out from Wichita, Kansas, out to live in LA so that she could train me inside of psychology and I could teach her what I called inner training, what I learned from kind of the ancient wisdom traditions that I was studying at the time. And this is 20 years ago. Like you cannot say meditation. That was not popular. People didn't understand what it was, you know? And so, she's sending me her clients. And I remember going up to an $80 million estate in Bel Air. And I only saw stuff like this on TV, and they had a butler and they had all the cars in the driveway. And I was like, where am I right now? And I'm like this little kid from Andover, Kansas. I think my town had like 10,000 people in it, and Wichita was the big city. about 45 minutes away or something. And I'm just like, what can I possibly do here? Why am I here? Why did Lou send me here? That was my mentor's name. And the lady I was there was quite well known. And I remember looking at the fireplace mantle, and she's standing next to, at the time, he was the president, President George Bush. And I was like, "Do you know the president?" And she's like, "Oh yeah, that's my uncle. He babysat me." And I was like, "Where am I right now?" And she gives me a tour of the house a little bit, and we go to the library, and she's got these pictures of a beautiful family, and I'm like, she knows the president. I'm just like, I don't like, what am I here for? Like everything looked great. And we go to the library, and she kind of closes the doors behind her. She sits down, and she just starts crying uncontrollably. And I was like, "Oh, I know exactly why I'm here." And I was like, I know exactly what to do with that. And she had this deep, deep grief and this deep sadness. Um, even though she had everything, there's this extraordinary emotional turmoil. And I was like, nobody really helped her with that. She didn't understand what to do with that. And so it's like but in many ways, she was exactly where I was when I first started out. Like I knew that kind of inner pain, even though my circumstances maybe reflected the kind of inner pain that I had. She had these beautiful circumstances, a lot of money, a lot of wealth, a lot of prestige, beautiful family, all that health. But inside, she was really, really struggling. And it was like, man, if you're struggling inside yourself with anxiety or overwhelm or shame or sadness or fear or anxiety or whatever it is, and we don't know how to get out of that, then we just basically have a beautiful prison, but like our inner well-being isn't there. We kind of have nothing. And so it's like you can create, and a lot of times the way people drive to create success is causing or training or conditioning inner turmoil. And then all of a sudden we get our results, we get our outcomes. But if we've been training anxiety, overwhelm, fear, panic along the way, once you create the success or the money or the outcome, that doesn't just go away because the results are there, because now we've trained and conditioned the painful emotions that we're now living with inside. And so we might have beautiful realities and look very successful, but then we're waking up to pain every day. So like, as I say, like what we wake up to every day in the morning, in my opinion, is the first representation of our success. If like we wake up to joy and we wake up to fulfillment, we wake up to peace, we wake up to happiness, even if we have a modest life, like we have everything. But if we have all kinds of stuff materialistically or a very successful business or career, or we're famous, but we're waking up to, a pain that we can't get away from because it lives inside us, right? Then at the end of the day, we have very little.
Across your study of people, I mean, you have like a PhD in people, in emotion, and through an MBA that you got through your life, right? Of going through. I mean, I'm sure you look back now with your family and what you went through, and I'm guessing with a little bit of gratitude, because it really exposed you to the human condition, one end of the spectrum. I mean, is that a fair statement?
Yeah, for sure. Like 100%. Like in many ways, you know, um, I have nothing but gratitude for my past and everything that I've been through, because if it hadn't been for that, I wouldn't have had the motivation to do the things I've done to become who I am. And so in many ways, like my passion and my relentlessness around wanting to understand the art of transformation, and like what does it mean to truly attain, mastery of ourself in a real way, and studying transformation in the way that I have, and being all over the world in different countries and so on, was all motivated by the pain and the suffering that I was inside of. And if I eliminate that pain and that suffering, like that desire that I had to understand transformation just would not have been there. It would not have been fueled in the same way. And so in so many ways, it's like I can look at every challenge in my past, and things that I moved through and what happened, and it made everything that I know today possible. And also it's like I'm so grateful because the compassion that I have for other people today is because of the pain that I once knew, because there's nobody that I ever meet, no matter their circumstance, where I don't have compassion for what they're going through, number one, and love for who they are. And it's like, I know it's kind of weird to say, but it's like a lot of people think love is just this like natural thing that we do as human beings. But what I find is that love, especially unconditional love, the highest form of love, we kind of earn that. We got to train that, and it's forged through fire. And it's like, because it's like, if I remember early on, I was like, hey, if I like have people who are unkind to me, right? Or people that did me wrong. I remember one of the earliest things that taught me this was, when we were all living together and we were all doing the drugs and drinking and all the stuff, like my best friend at the time, slept with my girlfriend at the time. And like that was like I thought my life was over, right? Because I was headed over heels in love, back then and all this kind of stuff. And like back then I kind of had two emotions. It was like I was fine, and then it was like rage. And I got in a lot of fights and there was a lot of violence and that kind of thing. And I just remember this blinding rage that like I lived with every day. And I remember it hit me. And one of my first mentors was like, your job is to get to a place where you can think of your ex and you can think of your your friend, this person used to be your friend that you called one of your best friends, and you can feel nothing but compassion and love for who they are and where they are. And I remember when I was first shared, when somebody first shared this idea with me, I thought they were insane. I was like, number one, they don't deserve it. Number two, do you not understand what just happened and what I'm going through? Right. And like, you're a crazy person. But then they explained something to me and they were like, listen, you're waking up to this rage every day, this anger, and you're waking up to this sadness and this grief and that you're experiencing. And at the end of the day, this is what you're experiencing with yourself. Nobody's doing this to you today. Like this is, this thing that happened is a month ago, and then it's 6 months ago. And then for some people, it's like the divorce or the whatever it is 10 years ago. But yet we might still be waking up to the visceral pain as though it's happening right now today. And so ownership is like, man, well, I'm doing this to myself. And and at the end of the day, I'm not answering to an event of circumstance anymore. My friend, sleeping with my girlfriend at the time, right? And this betrayal that I perceived. I'm just waking up to my own experience with myself, and it's my own mind that's imprisoned me with this thought that just keeps playing over and over and over and over again, and thinking about it, and it's like, wow, I deserve to be free of this. And then that was when I realized, like, oh, if I can get to a place where I can hold love and compassion for the two of them, then I'll wake up to love and compassion for myself. And so I'm not actually doing this for them or because they deserve it. I'm first doing this because I deserve to know this love and compassion that I want to know for myself. I want to be free of this pain. And so then I started breaking it down and I started looking for it. I remember asking a question, why is it that I can hold compassion for them, or why do they deserve compassion from me? And I asked this question, right? It occurred to me. I was like, why do they deserve compassion from me, despite what they did? And then, like, all of a sudden, the answer started to come. Well, we were all in a terrible environment, and we all grew up in pretty abusive realities, and we were all suffering, and we were all drunk and high most of the time, and maybe not even coherent with what was going on, and we were kind of sharing in this pain together. So of course we behaved in ways that were going to be painful to each other. That didn't start with us. It came from where we came from, in our upbringing, in our environments. And so in some ways, it's like these decisions we were making weren't even our fault, because we weren't set up to make different choices and decisions. And so I could have compassion for their environment, and I could have compassion for the pain they were in and that I was in and that I was sharing in with them. And so it's like, man, they're not at fault fully for this thing. Like I contributed in some ways. And, all of a sudden I could start finding ways to have compassion for them. And it was like, man, I have somebody that took me under their wing to help me learn a different way. And they don't have that right now. And so I have compassion that they still are in the pain that they know, and they don't have a vehicle to leverage like I was presented with. And so it's like, before I knew it, I just started to like very intentionally direct myself toward compassion, and then this sense of the love that I had for them, to the day where I remember thinking about like them, and I thought about what happened, and I felt compassion for where they were, and just a sense of like universal unconditional love for them. And it was in that moment that I realized, like, oh, I'm free. Like I don't have any money right now. I don't have a business. I basically, am couch surfing because like my mentor was paying for the home. I couldn't even afford kind of rent at that time. But I was like, I'm free. And like realizing that I had this inner freedom from reality defining who I was like the first like aha moment where I was like, I have something that I know I can support people to realize for themselves, and I want to share it.
Wow. So pain is inevitable. Suffering is optional, and that the cuteness does not mean it needs to be chronic. And what I'm hearing you say is that love and compassion, empathy, understanding, presence is the medicine that helps you get through chronic. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think so. And and it's something that we have to cultivate, we have to train, we have to develop like any other muscle. It's not just gonna happen. It's not just gonna be there, right? It's like we have to understand, how do we nurture compassion? How do we become a compassionate person? And how do we become a loving person? How do we become a joyful person? Because these things don't just happen. They're not just like a birthright. They don't just occur. They're not quote unquote natural. Matter of fact, if we look at like kind of how the nervous system works, unfortunately we have a fear bias, right? We have a pain bias, because if we look at our nervous system works, right, fight or flight, like we always prioritize survival. It's like our brain is always looking for the threat, like where's the threat and how do I avoid it? Where's the threat that's going to cause me pain and how do I avoid it? So we actually actually are disposed with a natural negative bias, actually, if we really understand how we're made up. And so it's like I'm always looking for the thing that's going to cause me pain and how do I avoid it, which usually causes pain, anxiety or fear or sadness, etc., in the attempt to avoid it. And so it's like we have to understand that that's actually our kind of our nature, if you will. And okay, well, how do we leverage our nature, or how do we get into a discipline of practice and training and cultivation where we can make our nature that of compassion or that of love, as opposed to our disposition to that negative bias, if that kind of makes sense.
Yeah, it absolutely makes sense. When I think about the fact that we all have an amygdala that is often trying to hijack us. It when you look at from all the types of people, from the people that you're doing that your organization does for like basically for free, to the elite of the elite, what are the three most common chronic pains or sadnesses or sorrows that we as human beings suffer with? And to your point, what are the actionable things that someone who's listening to this podcast can go, you know what? It's like, hey, just doing 20 air squats is the equivalent of like a 20-minute walk, right? Like that's something super simple that anyone can do, right? So can you dive into what are those common things that you know that if anyone came across from you, you go, here's probably three things that they're probably suffering chronically. And here are the things that people listening can take action today on.
Yeah. So the way I would name the three, and it's interesting because the circumstances can be sort of vast, right? Because I think like when it as it comes to suffering, like how do we end suffering so that that's not chronic? And I know this is weird to hear, but and I know this to be true. Like 90% of people are chronically suffering today, as it pertains to at an emotional level. Like what the average person wakes up to, if they're in touch with it. Most people aren't even in touch with what I think of as the ghost in the machine, because we develop these coping mechanisms to basically not be aware of what's actually there for us. Like we look at the phone, 5 minutes upon waking. Most people are scrolling social media, or looking at their email, or distracting right away, or they're looking at Netflix several hours a night, or they're obsessed with work, right? They throw themselves into work or exercise or something like this. And a lot of it, with what people don't realize, is like, man, I feel this emotional pain if I do these things, if I eat, if I scroll social, I watch TV, I do this or that, then it like takes that edge off, right? But it doesn't have the pain go away. It just has us forget about it. So like 90% of people are getting through their day. They're not thriving. Like they really are suffering, right? They're enduring pain day by day by day. And what happens is, and I believe that this is lack of education, the mistake that the majority of people make is they look at the circumstances that are going on that they believe are, creating that pain. Kind of like the example I gave of my best friend, my girlfriend, having an affair, cheating on me, as I would, have made it back then, right? And so people go, well, I have this pain because I got divorced, or they go, I have this pain because I lost somebody that I love and I care about, or I have this pain because my health isn't where I want it to be, or I have this pain because I'm in debt, or I lost my money, or I lost my job. And like we can look at all kinds of different circumstances that remind us of the pain that we're in. And I think that's the distinction, because when I really break things down with people and we look at, okay, well, how do we transform this? It's really about getting to the future first, like really getting a clear sense of what do we want to create, as opposed to focusing on the challenge itself. But then if we look at like what are the most common, points of pain that people are struggling with, it's three things, right? And it's not the circumstance that caused the pain, which I think a lot of people get confused about, because like for me, anger was what I was managing, right? Anger and rage. And that is probably, that's one of the three for sure, is people are answering to holding on to some anger. And I think resentment is a form of anger, rage is a form of anger. So there's these different forms of anger, but like one lane is anger. Like that's the common pain people are experiencing, one of the top things that people are struggling with. And we might look at it, we might go, oh, here's the circumstance. It's not the circumstance that needs to be solved for first, it's the anger. Because the anger, like in my case, I grew up with it. I grew up in an environment of anger. Like everybody around was angry and hostile. And so like that got ingrained in my nervous system, starting like it does for any of us when my nervous system was being developed before I could even talk. Like all emotion came before language. Because when we're a year old or we're 6 months old, or like one of my best friends, like their child is two, just turned two. She's barely just starting talking, right? And it's like her whole communication system has been emotions for the first 2 years of her life, because she can't talk, she can't think, she doesn't have language yet. And even most of what she's saying right now is just the copying of sound. She still doesn't really understand the words. And that doesn't really start sinking in until like 7 in a really, really clear way. And so it's like our first 7 years of life is all emotional experience as it pertains to the nervous system, emotions and sensation. So then later on, depending on that imprinting, right, we then go, man, I'm angry about such and such. But anger was the predetermined reaction to the circumstance. So it's like my girlfriend and my friend, they slept together. My reaction was anger. Another person would not have gone to anger. Their preconditioning might be sadness. Another person might have gone to deep unworthiness, depending on their conditioning, or as I say, the ghost in the machine that's kind of predetermining their choices, decisions, actions, and reactions to life that a lot of us don't even realize are happening. It's under the radar, right? So like the three most common spaces of suffering people are looking to get out of is, number one is anger. And then number two is some sense of anxiety, overwhelm, that we usually just describe as like general stress, right? But it's like high anxiety and overwhelm is really painful. Okay, it's a pretty strong fear-based state. And then I would put the third lane is some form of sadness, and I would put grief in the sadness category, because grief is really just intensified sadness, right? And so I would say those are the three lanes that people are usually suffering with most. Those are the three things to answer for. And in some ways, the way we answer for them, regardless of which three they are, is really the same formula. And the first step is being willing to step inside of ownership, which we've been taught to do the exact opposite. Because like if we remember when we were kids and somebody did something to us, I don't know if you had this happen or you remember this. It's like you did something to your friend, or like or your sister, your brother, your parents pulled you around and go, say you're sorry, right? And it's like we have all these like early conditionings where we were taught that our pain was caused by somebody else, right? Like we got that training, but we didn't even realize it was happening. So then later on, we go, man, I'm angry because you did this to me, or because this happened, or I feel sad because this person doesn't want to be with me anymore, or because I lost my job, or like my dog died, and I feel sad. And it's like it's totally okay that we feel sad in the face of loss, for sure. Like, of course, it's going to happen. But then the question that sort of came to my mind eventually was like, well, 10 years after the event, should I still be sad about it? Why am I sad 10 years later? Like, what am I doing? What's going on that has me be sad 10 years later? Why do some people 10 years later, they feel joy and they feel happiness, and then some people don't? They're still maybe as sad or even more sad than they were upon the loss of something. And what's going on there? What's different between those two humans? One person who's, thriving and joyful and happy 10 years after a challenging event or circumstance, and then another person who's like, their life is worse than it's ever been. And it's like, well, what's the difference here? It's like, oh, okay, let's start breaking that down. So it's like first step to how do we change this is ownership. Going, hey man, yes, something challenging happened, and I accept that, but this emotion is my responsibility. So if I'm angry, that's my responsibility. That's my nervous system. Nobody can actually change my emotion for me because, like I said, conditioning started when we were little. I'm the only one that can really influence and change my nervous system directly, even if I want somebody else to do it. I'm the only one that can really make the decision to do it. So it's like, it's not about fault. It's about, what am I responsible for? And so if I feel sad, if I feel angry, if I feel overwhelm or anxiety, at the end of the day, I'm the one responsible for that because I'm the one feeling it. I'm the only one who can do something about it if I know how. And so it's like that first step, or like, what do I do? What's the playbook? Is I go, man, I feel sad. That's okay. And this is mine. And it doesn't sound like a big deal or a big step, but if we just start acknowledging that, right, I feel anger and that's okay. And this is mine. All of a sudden, we're not putting the responsibility on the circumstances anymore. And now possibilities of changing that emotion start to become available to us.
Yeah. So what does that look like? Let's follow that. Let's pull that thread a little bit more, right? Okay. I'm angry. And oftentimes, like if we all are in a relationship with someone, you have a moment. I call them a marital conversation, and you're angry, right? Jenna and I, like something happens, I'm angry. In that moment, I'm going, I'm angry at Jenna. But what I'm hearing you say is that if I'm being self-aware, which I'm actually re-changing that around, self-aware just means self-owned, right? I mean, that's really what you're trying to say here is going, I'm angry and I need to actually own the fact that I'm angry, and it most likely has nothing to do with the circumstance. Is that fair?
Yeah, exactly. And it's like giving yourself permission to start building a new relationship with the emotion, which starts with a willingness to be in a new acknowledgement, like you were just speaking to, right? And so it's like, if I'm in that conversation with my significant other and I realize I'm getting upset, it's like, oh, in this moment I'm feeling angry. And amen. Number two is like, acknowledge it. Like, it's okay that I'm angry. Like, in this moment I'm feeling upset. That's totally okay. And the anger is my responsibility. I am not upset because of anything this person just did.
Yeah. I'm upset because I'm choosing to be upset.
Well, and again, I wouldn't say I'm choosing it,
Okay.
right? It's like, in this moment I'm angry, and that's okay. It's my responsibility. And the reason I say that is because you didn't really choose the anger. It got conditioned on your behalf. Who knows when? Maybe when you were a child. And then it kept getting reconditioned and reinforced as you grew up. And it just became like almost like an inner bad habit or reflex. And so, I don't like, what I find is like, people have this challenge where they choose, like, oh, in this moment I'm angry and I'm choosing it. Then they get upset because they're choosing it in their mind. Right. And it's like, no, you're not choosing the sadness, and you're not choosing to be angry, and you're not choosing to feel unworthy. That's a reflex. It's an inner bad habit that got trained and it got conditioned. And so now we're managing. Now you're dealing with it. Now you're, answering to it, if you will. And so that's why I say, like, in this moment, I'm feeling angry. That's okay. But it's still my responsibility. I'm not angry because of anything that's happening. I'm not angry because of what they did or what they said or because of the circumstances or what's happening in my environment. And even though some of those may not be ideal, some of it might not be in alignment, that's okay. Doesn't mean that it's causing the anger.
Yeah.
And so, like, if we can get that, and that's what I mean by, like, first step is just ownership, which is just number one, developing the capacity of awareness and sensitivity to what's there for us. Anger is an example, sadness is an example, unworthiness, anxiety. And then number two, like, taking ownership of that. Hey, this is my nervous system. This is my inner reflex. I'm feeling this way because of conditioning, because of training, nothing else. It's not because of the current circumstance. Now that positions us to start doing something else with it.
Yeah. So what is that next thing? So let's take my example. I have that awareness. I'm in the middle of it. Maybe I've actually had an external sort of Mount Vesuvius moment, right? It, I guess we all are maybe prone to do. Then what, right? I've owned it. I've acknowledged it. I've said like, yes, like I'm angry, and that's okay. Now, what's that next thing? What's the playing that out? How do then what?
Yeah. So next step, right? First step, awareness, sensitivity, ownership. Next step is we got to learn to deactivate it. We've got to learn to center that emotion. We have to learn to calm that down. And that's about nervous system influence. And so what might be helpful is, like, if you're willing, or if you have a client or like a friend or somebody, like, if you can think of a real circumstance where it's like, man, the mountain's erupting, as you said, right? And it's like, great. Well, what are those dynamics? What I find is sometimes if we can just break down a real situation, it helps people understand, like, oh, that's how you do it. This is possible. And it immediately applies to all kinds of other circumstances because the framework doesn't change, if that makes sense. So like if we're in that space, like what would you say as an example of like when the mind's saying I'm upset because, what would you say is the thing that the mind might say about the significant other, about someone you're interacting with?
Well, I think the monkey brain of me would say she's not being very thoughtful. It would probably be very external related in terms of wanting to blame the circumstance. I think that's probably where I'd initially go. But and Jen and I have had these conversations that when you actually get away from the moment, you realize that if you actually look at the intention of the other person, is like Jenna is not the enemy. She's not being. She's like the biggest fan of me, and yet we forget that. So I don't know if I'm answering your question here, Joey, but I think that I'm probably being very blamey, and probably because it's satisfying. Like the this is why, this is the genesis of it, and if I can just like get this apology, therefore then I can like move on. And what I'm hearing you say is I need to actually probably give that compassion and love to myself and the apology to myself.
Yeah. And I think the first step that can be helpful is like when we're in that moment we're angry, where we go, man, I wish you would be kinder. I think that was the word you used, right? It's like if we ask a question in that moment we feel angry and we go, okay, let's pretend that they were supposed to do something and then they didn't do it. So first, let's answer that. Like, hey, I'm angry. They were supposed to do something. So what was they supposed to do? What was she supposed to do that she didn't do? That the byproduct of them not doing it was feeling angry. What would you say that might be?
Because she was not fully like listening to what I was saying in this conversation, because she's doing a bazillion other things in all her different identities. And like maybe that's a good example.
Yeah. So if we break that down, I'm upset because they're not listening to me. And then the assumption is that I'm not important to them.
Yes. Ooh.
Right. They're not listening to me. I'm not important to them. So like so many people, like, I don't know, anybody in a relationship probably feels angry at times and is like, they're not listening to me and they're not making me important. Right. Right. But if we break it down and we go, well, what's really the byproduct of the anger? It's not actually because the person's not listening to you. It's because we have the expectation that they're supposed to listen and that they're supposed to be making us a priority in some way we want them to in that moment, that they're not, that they may not even know they're supposed to make us important because we didn't tell them. And so if we realize that anger is a byproduct of our own mind and perception of the moment, not the other person or what they actually did. And I'm angry because that expectation that I was holding, again, ghost in the machine, that I didn't even know I had, I didn't even know they were supposed to listen in a specific way. And I didn't know they were supposed to make me a priority in the way that I want them to make me a priority. Like I didn't even know I was holding that in myself, but now I'm upset because it didn't happen.
So, Joey, what are your recommendations? You feel the motion, you feel like that, hey, you know what, and that monkey brain, like you just feel like and then when you take that step back and you realize, hey, it's because I'm not feeling important, right? Well, she's not being kind, that, hey, it's because I'm not feeling important. Like, what would you recommend people do if they're practicing this, right? Because you said this is a muscle, like we're scrimmaging. I mean, by the way, we're doing live scrimmage. It's like full pads. Right? I mean, that's pretty much like when you're saying like do this isn't in a gym where you're like isolating the bicep here. I mean, this is like full contact. What do you recommend someone do then, right? Whether it's dealing with like anger, grief, anxiety, or that, as you said, the stress, overwhelm. What 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 is someone supposed to do when they get to that point? What's your recommendation when you're coaching people?
Yeah, got it. So that second piece, and again, that first piece of like ownership is so important because the second step will be more challenging, or it's not possible because the mind will override it if we don't get good at nailing that first step, which is like, hey, in this moment I feel angry. I may not understand how I'm driving the anger. Keyword there is I'm driving my own anger. My wife isn't doing it to me. My husband's not doing it to me. My boss didn't do it. The circumstance didn't cause it. The person that just cut me off is not responsible for the anger that just welled up in me. In this moment, I'm feeling angry. That's okay. That's my anger. It's my responsibility. at some level, I'm the one fueling it. I don't need to understand how. Like we can train that later. Right. I was just giving the example of like expectation unmet as like just understanding that there's this energy between us. There's this step between us and the other person where we are interacting that like expectation that's actually the cause of the anger or the thing fueling it. Right. So once we acknowledge it, once we know that's where we are, the best way to center it is actually nervous system stimulation because anger is a fear-based state, neurologically speaking. It's a sympathetic action in the body, fight or flight. And so what we got to do is we got to get the brain to change how it's functioning. We got to go from sympathetic to parasympathetic. We've got to get the brainstem calmed down in the back of the head here. We got to get our prefrontal cortex active. We got to get it functioning because that's responsible for critical thinking, creative thinking, higher reasoning, joy and peace, and those kind of feel good emotions. And the best way to do that is a breath technique, right? I always teach people what I call the four-sided breath. So it's like in this moment, I feel angry. That's okay. That's my responsibility. I'm not angry because of the circumstances here. This is the pattern that exists within me that got conditioned. This is my reflex. So now I'm going to start retraining the reflex. And best way to do that is start top of the head all the way down to your toes. Relax your body as fully as you possibly can. Touch the tongue to the palate roof of the mouth. Take a gentle inhale through the nose. 2, 3, 4. Pause, hold the breath at the top, and then exhale out through the nose. 2, 3, 4. Pause, hold the breath at the bottom. Continuing that breath cycle. Inhale through the nose. Pause, hold at the top. Exhale out the nose. Pause, hold at the bottom. Smile on your face, like physical smile. And then focusing deep on your lower abdomen, like where your belly button is, doing your best to breathe and draw that breath into the lower abdomen, focusing on the belly button, and then exhale, let the belly fall. And then just going back through those things again, start at the crown, top of the head, relax your body from the head all the way down to the tips of the toes, relax the body fully. Tongue touching the palate, roof of the mouth, physical smile on the face, gentle inhale through the nose, pause at the top, 4 seconds, exhale, pause at the bottom, breathe, focus on your belly button. And if you breathe and you do that breath, you'll quickly feel the nervous system relax. You'll have the body center. And then there's an inflection point where if we practice this breath, you'll be able to actually, it's like a nervous system switch. You'll be able to get past that inflection point where you're in a fight or flight response, anger, and you can calm that fight or flight response down. And all of a sudden there will be like a sense of centeredness or maybe like a inner calm or peace that will sort of be present. And if you stay focused on the breath and your breath count and those techniques, the mind can't focus on how the person's not listening or the expectation that's not getting met because we're focusing so fully on the breath and the technique that the nervous system will relax, it will calm down, and the anger will shift.
Wow.
Is that making sense?
Oh, it's making sense. And I have to tell you, having been on the other side of this, of Joey going through that, I got to tell you that you could feel that first couple breaths, it was kind of like you're like gathering yourself for like a lift. And then all of a sudden, then when you said like put a physical smile on your face, it was like, like when you see like a Krispy Kreme donut, then all of a sudden it's like you break it open and all of a sudden that glaze just like crack. That is what that like felt like. And then it was inevitable. It was undeniable, the feeling of being like when you talk about being centered. I mean, that was, man, that was incredible.
So like physiologically, right? If you're focused on that breath technique and if you're doing it correctly, it is literally impossible to feel anger or anxiety or sadness or overwhelm while doing the technique. Like it will shift the emotion, right? We're training the emotion directly. And like when I train people, or like if people are going through the curriculum, the training, like we would do that for like several weeks where they would, open up the app and they would push play and they would literally just do that four-sided breath for 20 minutes straight, hopefully once a day. And then we would incorporate it throughout the day. So you do your 20 minutes of four-sided breathing, like in the morning, maybe right after you wake up, you just practice that breath. Like literally you would just do that technique for 20 minutes. what you're doing is you're training a capacity, you're developing a skill, you're developing almost like a nervous system muscle. While, if you do that with repetition and consistency, and then we would take it a step further, we do what I call an action plan. And so you would do that breath maybe 2 or 3 or 10 times throughout your day, where you would just tune in. Hey, in this moment, where's my nervous system at? What do I feel? And maybe you feel anxious. Maybe the next time you check in a few hours, you feel excited. Maybe a few hours later, you feel happy. Maybe a few hours later, you're feeling sad. And like you check in, and then you would just do your four-sided breath for 5-10 seconds, maybe 1 or 2 rounds. That's it. And then what you're doing is you're developing a competency. You're literally training a skill set. You're developing a reflex. So now when you're in the sparring match, kind of as you referenced it earlier, and you're in that really intense meeting with your boss, or you're in the board meeting, or if you're a pro athlete, you got rattled and now you got to perform, or we're just having that conversation with our wife or our kid, and we realize we have completely lost center, and now we're upset and we're angry, or we're in that space. It's like, if you take that deep breath in, tongue touching the roof of the mouth, take that gentle breath in through the nose. By the time you get to the bottom of your breath, your nervous system will switch. But the only way you'll get to that competency is if we train it a little bit consistently day by day, with the 20 minutes in the morning, the action plan throughout the day. So for me, when I look at pattern dynamics, I look at it as, hey, we're going to become aware of I call it the ghost in the machine, the things we don't even know are going on. And we're going to train the skill set of awareness and sensitivity. And then we're going to train the skill set of like what to do with what's there when we find it, in a very direct way, like this. Step 2, man, we need to find center, because if we don't find center, we can't go to step 3, which is redirect, right? There's no way to access compassion by thinking alone. And this is where it breaks down in a lot of modern, like our modern therapies, or traditional therapies, right? Psychology or coaching, etc. Is like, we just try to, accept in our mind, like you were saying earlier, oh, I trust that my wife loves and cares for me, and I'm gonna, trust the best in her right now, or I'm gonna have compassionate thoughts for this person. But your emotions don't care about what you're thinking. Matter of fact, it's the other way around, because developmentally, as I said, our first many years of life, emotions were first. It's not a chicken or egg thing. Did the thoughts come first? Did emotions come first? No, emotions came first. Sensation in the nervous system, that was first. Then we impose thought on top of that. And so it's like, man, we need to learn how to manage emotion directly, so that we can redirect the mind and the thought.
This is amazing, Joey. I mean, this is absolutely amazing. I've never heard anyone, I've heard people talk about like breathing, but it's always in like kind of this separate like thing. And it, you heard like Tony Robbins talk about priming, right? And maybe getting to a place of gratitude. But um, there's a freedom out there that I think is this freedom of emotion. And I feel like you're articulating the formula of the freedom of not being bothered. It's not to say that you aren't bothered, but it's the freedom of not to be continually bothered.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's freedom. Like when you get to a degree of mastery over yourself, like true mastery over yourself, then you're absolutely free, because you are no longer a byproduct of the world. The world and your environment will never dictate who you are and what you do ever again. Matter of fact, the opposite becomes true. You become that which defines your environment, and your environment becomes a byproduct of you by way of your influence on your environments.
Yeah. So it's like the saying that instead of life happening to you, you're happening to life.
In the most direct, practical way. Exactly right.
That is amazing. I mean, this isn't just about the recentering either, in terms of those grief, that sadness, the overwhelm, anxiety, or like rage. I mean, this is something in terms of in manifesting.
Precisely. Yeah. Because after you find center, right, now we can go on to the next steps, which is we've got to recondition a new pattern dynamic, right? And that's why, in my opinion, 90% of our focus and attention, as I was kind of speaking of earlier, should be going to what do we want to create and produce in our life, and where are we going, not looking at our past. So a lot of people, when they look at how do I change my circumstances, it's like, again, we go back to like traditional therapies, they're looking at the past and what happened when I was 5 and yada, yada, yada. And it's like, that's actually going to reinforce the very thing you want to get out of, because every time you think about painful things that have happened in your life, you activate the sadness or the anger within your nervous system, and you actually strengthen the anger. You actually strengthen the sadness. You actually strengthen the grief, and you feel more grief, not less. You feel more anxiety, not less. And so you accidentally are producing the very thing that you're trying to solve for, the thing you're trying to get out of. And so if we just sort of acknowledge not the past, but where are we in the moment, man, in this moment, I feel shame. I don't need to know where the shame came from. Like that's not necessary for transforming it. We just need to know how do we manage it? Well, we breathe and we center, right? And now we redirect. Well, what's the vision of, in this case, relationship that I want? Well, I want deep connection with my wife, and I want love in the relationship, and I want to have fun together, and I want partnership, and I want trust, and these are the activities I want to do together. And we go, well, what are the qualities that are going to drive me to that? It's like, okay, compassion, love, joy. And so once we stop the train and we can center the nervous system and get our prefrontal cortex active, great. Now we go to compassion. Now we activate love and start to reinforce that because we can actually feel it within ourselves. We actually embody it. We're actually in the experience of it. Now we can direct it. And so once I kind of find that center, I can go, man, like, so I have so much compassion for my wife because, we're managing a lot. She's got a lot on her plate, and I can be there for her. Or, I love her because we're in this partnership together. Or we can focus on, well, what do I want to provide? What do I want to give to the relationship? How can I be there for her? Like there's a lot of different redirects that we can go to after we find center, but they have to be predetermined. In the same way, if we really want that breath technique to work, we got to do it as a training. We got to do it 20 minutes a day for a bit of time and get good at the technique so it becomes more reflexive. Same thing, like in Power Vision, right? Like in a curriculum, we would design the vision for relationship we want, and what are the constructs that we need to sort of cultivate within ourselves at an emotional level, a thought level, and then an action level. And we would visualize that. That would be an inner dynamic. We would do 10 minutes a day. Like, hey, here's how I want to show up with my significant other. Well, we need to practice doing it with ourselves before we're with the other person. And what a lot of people do is they wait for like an argument to happen, and then they're searching for their idea of what they were going to do instead, or what their coach or therapist told them to do, and it's never going to happen. Like you're already done, because from a pattern perspective, once those fear-based emotions are active, you're done. Like you're lost. They are going to take over. Whereas if we're like, man, we close our eyes and, like, as an example, another training, you just 10 minutes a day, you sort of breathe, find center. Maybe that's 2 minutes. You find that center, and then you acknowledge why you love your wife, right? Like you feel that love in your heart. You really feel it in your nervous system. Eyes are closed. And, 2 to 5 minutes, you're like, man, I love my wife because we're on the same page and she's there for me. And here are the qualities I appreciate about her. And then, it's a muscle. You're flexing, you're training love. You're training the muscle. Now, when you feel upset, oh, I'm upset, breathe, center. Now love's there for you because you actually practice the swing.
Yeah, instead of packed away in the pantry, it's like, oh, it's actually right there, mise en place, ready to cook with.
Exactly. And so this is what I mean when I said earlier, like, no, if we want to know love, we got to train it. If we want to understand compassion, we got to train it. We want to understand peace, we got to train it. It's like how I first came upon this was like, I was dating my ex, and she had an ex, and her ex he was a super intense guy, right? He was like ex-Israeli special forces, and emotional intelligence not very high. And, he was like, I remember, he was that kind of person where you looked at him and you're like, I don't understand how you can treat somebody you care about this way. Like he had no problem leaving his wife and his kids out on the street, and he would yell and scream at them and just like terribly abusive, right? And then of course I was managing my own like inner patterns back then because I was still pretty young. And like the thought of this guy, I would just get so angry and enraged because of my background. It's like I just wanted to fight this guy. I was like, this is not helpful. And then same thing, like my mentor kind of rang in my ears about like when that affair happened with my best friend and my ex-girlfriend. I was like, man, Bruce, like his name was Bruce. I was like, I need to get to a place where I just feel this love for this guy, and I can have acceptance and compassion for him, even though like when I see him with his kids and how he's treating his children, his ex, and all the things is like horrific to me. I'm in a lot of pain, and anger is not like helping the situation. It's actually fueling it. So what I started to do was I sat down and I was like, I'm not getting up until I feel peace and I can have compassion for him. And so I'd sit down, and honestly, when I first started doing this, it was like hours, right? Because at first I just felt anger and I felt that blood boiling and all the things would happen. But then I would be like, man, why is it that I should feel compassion for this man? It's like, well, his childhood was like living in Israel, and he endured these like a war zone literally when he grew up there, and he was in war like at a very young age, and man has he suffered. And I would get to those places of understanding, which then would translate to compassion. And then I remember I got to a place where I could feel love for him. I was like, man, he really is just doing the best he can. And like he wouldn't be this fired up if he didn't have an innate care and love for, these people in his life, right? His kids and his ex in this case. And I remember getting to the place where, he came over, and this is after many nights and many hours of practicing these things. This is where a lot of my frameworks came from, was I did it for myself first and figured it out, and then I taught my clients, and then I taught like literally hundreds of people one-on-one the exact same process. And I was like, great, it worked for several hundred people. Now I know it's a staple. Now I know it's solid, right? And so that's how like anything that I coach, teach, or train today came about that way. Like I did it first in the trenches, and then I replicated it literally hundreds of times over, and then it became kind of like a staple of curriculum that we teach and that we train today, right? So it's like this is how all this stuff came to be. And I remember I opened the door one day, and there he is. He's standing in the doorway, and he came to, because it was his day to pick up the kids, and my ex was late with the children, and I was like, oh God, he's gonna lose it, because like if he would have been there to pick them up, and then nobody's there, and like he waste his time, like he would have flew off the handle, right? And I remember thinking, oh, he's here. I get to practice my training that I've been doing, right? And I'm like, can I feel compassion and love when he's right in front of me? And I was ready because I've been practicing it, with myself every day, getting to a place of thinking about him, feeling compassion and love, thinking about him, feeling compassion and love, getting to peace, feeling compassion and love, right? It's like I was flexing the muscle. I was doing my swings. I remember I opened the door, and he was standing there, and he had this angry face. I was like, "Oh, I'm sorry. My ex, she's not here right now. The kids aren't here, but they'll be here soon." And he like was super angry. And I remember I felt like compassion. I felt love, and I almost wanted to kind of like smile and laugh, but I was like, "No, don't do it. Like that's going to set him off." And so I just sat there thinking, like, "Wow, I really did define my state in a completely different way than I would have reacted in the past." And in that awareness, he kind of looks at me almost like a pause, and he goes, it's actually great they're late. Do you have a minute? I hear you help people. Could I pick your brain?" And I was like dumbfounded. I was like, "Are you serious right now? This guy's asking me for help." So I was like, well, sure. Like, and I invite him in. I was like, "Do you want some tea?" He's like, "Yeah, can I have some tea?" And we sat down, and he began to ask me for like how I would handle certain situations he was dealing with at work, and that he was having, challenges with. So here this guy is, who hated me just as much as I hated him, for sure, is now asking me for my advice and support. And I realized in that moment, he didn't understand why he did that. But like emotion is communication from a nervous system standpoint, right? Like there's an electromagnetic field that comes off the body when we feel angry. And the electromagnetic field coming off the body and the heart and the organs, like it changes when we feel compassion and love. And your brain is interpreting all this. And so me holding a space of, in my opinion, like the space of like compassion and love, where I was once very angry, he no longer perceived me as a threat unconsciously. He didn't even realize that. So now all of a sudden he's asking me for support, and it created this opportunity for connection that we had literally never had before over years. Like we're talking years. Now he's asking me for support. Right. So it was like, when I look at the power of being able to be aware of how we feel, find that center, redirect, and train the mechanism of, in this case, compassion, love. It's like I started noticing, man, when I really actually feel this compassion, love, people are responding different. It's creating new openings. It's presenting new opportunities that were inherently not there when I wasn't managing the emotion to that degree.
It's so beautiful. I mean, everything you're saying, we are human beings, and that's really actually what you're bringing us back to, is that actual the being portion, and the human and who we want to actually become. And I love that you actually took on the conventional world, right? Because it's not always about excavating what's happened in the past. So I so appreciate you saying that. But I want to make sure that I'm understanding this, that and that the audience understand this. Is you're not saying you should now judge the fact as if you have a feeling of anger, or that if you have a feeling of grief or sadness or anxiety or overwhelm. That's not what you're saying here.
Yeah, 100%. Right. Like, matter of fact, it's the opposite. Accept that you're a human being, and that anger is natural, and resentment is natural. And and unworthiness and insecurity is all natural, which again is the opposite of the pharmaceutical commercial on TV where they list all the emotions. Hey, if you're feeling sad or grief or disappointed or whatever, and you're broken and there's something wrong with you, here's a pill. It's like, no, no, no. Like these emotions are normal and natural because you're a human being. We just haven't been trained what their proper place is or how to interact with them. And so let's learn to do that now. And then joy and passion and inspiration is also all that's natural, right? Serenity and peace, like all that's natural. We can access that too. We just need to understand, how do we do that? How do we train it? How do we cultivate it? And most individuals has just never received that training and that education, so they don't know how. They're all capable of it. Everybody's nervous system works the same way. We just need to learn its place. And so, like, as an example of this is like most people, their emotions they allow their emotions to inform about what's happening. And most people look at how they feel and they allow emotions to inform them about what they should do. So, like, if I feel hurt, right, and I feel, anger or resentment or sad, then that means I maybe should quit my job, right? This isn't the place for me. Or if I feel these emotions, it means that you've wronged me. It's informing me about the situation and the accuracy of what's happening, right? And so most people, it's like they feel something or they feel love, right? And it's like, oh, I feel this love, and it must be because this person likes me, right? And so instead of emotions informing us, about what we should do, or allowing emotion to inform us about what's happening, we need to flip that relationship and go, no, no, emotions are really there to inform me about where I am. Emotions are there to inform where I am and where I'm about to drive from. And so if we understand that, it's like, oh, in this moment I feel angry. No, I'm not angry because of what they did. And I definitely shouldn't listen to anger, as we've all learned, and do whatever occurs to me in terms of what like you should not say to a person what occurs to you when you're angry. And you probably don't want to write an email to your boss and send it when you're angry, thinking you did a good job there, because you might not have a job the next day. When you read it, you're like, oh boy, why did I write that email? Right? It's like we understand that our capacity is diminished when we feel angry. So it's like, instead of emotions informing where we are at or what we should do, or about it, or excuse me, what other people about what's happening or what it is we should do, they need to inform where we are at. So it's like, oh, in this moment I feel angry, and that's okay. I don't have the competency I usually have. So I need to take a moment and shift this for myself to get myself to a different place, so I'm able to produce what I want to create. So, like, what I used to do when I trained myself out of anger is I'd be like, Joey, in this moment you feel angry, therefore your competency is stupid. It's like, that's telling me where I'm at. I'm in a stupid place right now because I had this list of stupid things that I did when I was angry, that almost got me arrested and put in prison. And the people that I hurt, I had a very long list of like, oh, when I'm angry, I'm in a state where I'm going to do something stupid, right? Or, oh, when I feel sad, like that's not informing me again about what's happening, about what I should do. It's like, oh, when I feel sad, it's like, oh, I realize that in this moment I'm focused on the absence of something. So where am I at? I'm focusing on the absence, because every time somebody feels sad, they have to focus on the absence of something. That's how sadness is there. Sadness can't be there if we're not focused on the absence of something, the absence of what we think we want in the future, the absence of someone that we love and we care about, the absence of the health we think we should have, the absence of not having something that we had in our past. It's like, oh, in this moment I feel sad, and therefore my attention is on the absence of something. I'm present with the absence. Okay, if that's where I am, it's probably not going to produce what I want. I need to readjust. And so if we understand that emotions are informing where we are at, now we can leverage them like a radar dish to let us know where we are, and then we can reposition ourselves relative to who we want to become and what we want to create.
So it's our body being a gift to ourselves. That's what I'm taking. These emotions are a gift of your own internal pharmaceutical company saying, hey, uh, here's an anger. And if you want to, like, have, as Taylor Swift would say, those who play stupid games win stupid prizes, right? It's that's amazing. So I have a question. So why do the conventional miss this? Like, why do pharmaceuticals miss this? And like, where did you draw all this from? I mean, is this like just some like like some like ethereal 1960s sort of stuff that you like learned, or is this, or did you actually in your journey learn things that have been around for hundreds, if not like hundreds of years?
Yeah. So I had a, for me, when I looked at conventional methods, I just didn't see it producing the results I wanted. Right. It's like I met, and especially in LA, right? It's like, in LA, it's like everybody has their therapist or two, right? And it's like, okay, you've been working with a therapist for 10 years or 20 years, and I'm here because you're in this much pain, right? So I'm like, something's not working here. Like it's not producing the result that I felt like was possible for people. And even like when I was growing up, I didn't see it answering for things. I saw people doing it, but I didn't see it like really producing great results. So I was like, that doesn't make sense to me. And so I had a very different education from an early age. Like when I started Qigong with my martial arts master who's trained in the Shaolin Temple, I was 15, and he gave me, Eastern philosophy gave me a very different idea of the nervous system and how it worked, because we were focused on like breath techniques and the idea of chi and balance and alignment and so on. And so it's like I kind of had a different idea of how stuff worked. And so for me, one of my earliest trainings in education was actually going to India, Varanasi, India, where I studied with a Hindu guru. And what we did was we would meditate. We'd wake up at like 5 in the morning, and I would do internal training with a master there, 8 hours a day, 8 to 10 hours a day, and then I go to bed at night and I wake up and 8 to 10 hours a day of inner training. We never focused on the past. We never focused on childhood. We never focused on hardship, right? What we focused on was what's going on in you right now. Because what I noticed is like I would show up day after day after day. And when you're sitting in silence with yourself for 8 hours straight and you do this many, 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 many days in a row, it hit me one day because I had never been in so much pain in my entire life, so much suffering. Like when I sat there just in silence with myself, it's like I'm there feeling my emotions, and I had these thoughts, and I had the same emotions, I had the same thoughts, feel the same emotions. And so it was just like the sadness got bigger, and the anxiety got bigger, and the rage got bigger, and the fear got bigger. And what I realized eventually after weeks of doing this was like, Joey, you are just sitting here with yourself, by yourself, and you are in more pain than you've ever known in your entire life. This is you doing this to yourself on some level. So we would focus on what's currently happening, but then we would follow it up with breathing techniques like the four-sided breath. But we wouldn't do the four-sided breath for 20 minutes. We would do it for hours, right? Nervous system training and conditioning. And so what I was taught was like, hey, let's name what's happening emotionally, nervous system, and in the mind. And let's train the emotion, the nervous system, and the mind to operate in the way that's going to produce peace, that's going to produce love, that's going to produce joy. The byproduct of that training and conditioning will be these emotions. And so I received that training and that education. And so at a very young age, which is why when my first mentor, one of my very first mentors, Lou, brought me out, who's a psychologist, yeah, she trained me in psychology. That was part of our trade. Well, then I taught her this inner training stuff that I was doing that was able to make emotions shift, right? And was able to train and condition the nervous system in a completely different way than traditional methods understand. And so that's why I was able to produce or create very different results and had a very different approach than anybody else. And I had a non-bias. It's not like I went to 6 years of college and was like, oh, I have to do this because that's what I was taught. For me, it was always like, I'll try anything. And if it produces the result, I'm going to understand why it produced the result and what place does it have. Because I did a lot of stuff that didn't work, right? And I kind of left and was like, okay, we're gonna do that anymore, right? For sure. But then it was like what I learned is that nothing was perfect, right? It was like everything had a piece, kind of like to your point, like breathing. I realized, oh, it's really good for a specific thing. And psychology is really good for pattern recognition, like it's really good for a specific thing, but it doesn't really do the whole picture, right? Mindfulness is really good at a specific thing, but it's not the whole answer. And so basically what I did was I spent 22 years studying everything that had to do with human development, and then really wanted to understand its place kind of based on science, and like where does this fit based on what it does well? Like it's a tool, what does it solve for well? So I think that's why I was able to create something that most people didn't, is because I was just trial and error. And I had a very different, because I started with these ancient wisdom traditions, a very different approach. And then ultimately I kind of left the dogma of it all that didn't necessarily pan out, or that I couldn't verify did a specific thing for a specific reason, like maybe chanting or a certain ritual or something like that, where I think all that has its value. But from a training developmental standpoint, I just want to understand like kind of like martial arts, what's the mechanics that work? And then when I look at traditional therapy, like if you study the history of it, if you look at psychology and you look at like the founders of psychology, like Freud and things like this, it's like, well, like neuroscience has kind of disproven a lot of the theories, and yet we're still kind of training these, in my opinion, false concepts of how we actually function and operate, right? And then there was like a thought history, where I think that we were onto something, right? If we look at like the Napoleon Hill era, or like the Dale Carnegie era and this kind of thing, it's like we really got into thought being the supreme way. But the problem was, it was like, hey, we're going to think our way out of emotions. And so, although we created these great like thought modalities, thought training modalities, it was void the emotion. It really didn't manage emotions. Again, in my opinion, because they didn't have the neuroscience at that time to understand emotions, what they were and how they function from a brain nervous system mechanism. And so, again, it's like the most recent neuroscience has really shown us like this isn't the whole picture, it's a piece of it. And what I find is a lot of modalities, they are so like confined to the little piece they do and it having to be the right way, that they don't look at everything else. Whereas for me, I'm going to look at anything. Like if somebody brought me something new right now that I haven't seen yet, I'm going to be like, dude, teach me, help me understand this. Like, what's this about? And then I'm going to go, how does it fit?
Yeah. It's the keeping the main thing, right? The Stephen Covey. And what's interesting is that what I'm hearing you say is we're emotional beings who happen to specialize in thinking.
Exactly. Or I'd say is like emotion is first. Emotion drives the mind. The mind fuels emotion, right? So if I feel anger, my mind is going to think in a very narrow range of thinking, and it's going to produce thoughts associated with the intelligence of anger. And if I take and we do this at programs and trainings that I put on, I literally have people map it where they write anger and they literally write thought for thought down on paper, word for word, the thoughts that they have. And you can have a room full of 500 people and you could take everybody's paper and you could write down anger, and everybody's thinking the same theme of thoughts. They're all having the exact same thoughts. Anger translates as these same core thoughts, right? And then you could take sadness and you could take everybody's paper. And again, you're going to have the same core thoughts associated with sadness that every single person's mind is thinking, regardless of who they are in the room. And so it's like, oh, when sadness functions, it functions in a predictable way. When anger's there, it functions in a predictable way. So it's like anger, like emotion shows up, it tells the mind what to think. Emotion is what's telling the mind what to think, not the other way around. The mind doesn't tell us how to feel, which is the way most people go about the process of changing themselves with transformation. And then like chemistry doesn't work either, right? Because in my opinion, it's like chicken or egg. It's like if we change our emotional feeling, our the structure of our brain evolves, right? So emotion will define the structure of your brain as well, like physiologically speaking. Whereas like a pharmaceutical is not going to do that. Matter of fact, pharmaceuticals, if we really study and research it, create instability in the brain. And so if we're trying to create emotional stability and we're using whether it's pharmaceuticals or alcohol or legitimate drugs like cocaine or something like this, like that's actually creating instability in the brain, not stability. And so like the idea to like that you can chemically create balance in the brain is that it's just a broken concept. It doesn't work.
Wow. That is absolutely so fascinating to me, Joey. I want to talk a little bit about on the other side of this. Okay. We do this, we show up and do consistency. And by the way, everything you're sharing here, it's not a technology app that's going to drive a brand new venture capital startup. This, right? This is not something that you have to pay, $50 a month for. Like this is literally completely free. And it just relies on like your consistency and wanting and willingness to show up, right? Instead of 8 hours a day, you're just saying do 20 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah. Like you don't absolutely don't need 8 hours a day or to do the deep dive like I did. Matter of fact, studies have been done by just about every, Ivy League university at this point on breath work or mindfulness or meditation and its effects on the brain. And they've done plenty of studies where they took the live MRIs, pictures of people's brain and images of their brain, and then they had them just do 6 weeks of like breathing or 6 weeks of a specific inner training technique. And as little as 6 weeks, it created neuroplasticity, right? It actually changed the structure of a person's brain.
Wow.
And so that's how I land. Like 20 minutes wasn't just something I made up. That's what a lot of the studies used, was a 20-minute focused practice on a daily basis, right? So it was like, okay, I know that that's sound, right? So it's like 20 minutes in 6 weeks, you can literally restructure your brain. And so, and then it doesn't stop after 6 weeks. If you continue past that for, 6 months and a year and 5 years, it just continues to recondition and stabilize and make stronger those new structures and etc. But it's just like there's so much evidence where it's like, man, in a very small window of time, you can actually create physiological changes in your brain that then translate to the ability to feel more joy, right? Because joy is a brain mechanism, anger is a brain mechanism. If you look at people who are angry a lot, their amygdala is kind of like larger, right? Their brainstem is overdeveloped. Their prefrontal cortex is smaller, right? Whereas somebody who feels a lot of joy, it's the opposite. Their prefrontal cortex just behind their forehead is larger. Their amygdala is a little bit smaller. It's, the brain is not as much reactive to fight or flight. And so I think that's the thing that we're missing sometimes today, where it's like when somebody looks at the brain, they go, oh my God, the brain condition is X. It's like, no. A lot of times the brain is the effect of the stimulus imposed upon it. You change the stimulus on it, which we can do through breathing and focusing the mind in a certain way. The brain is going to recondition itself to the stimulus.
Wow. So you said anger, predictable, sadness, predictable. Let's go on the other side. Let's talk about joy, love, compassion, right? These are all like these like mechanisms that we can continually. Are those outcomes predictable? Are those predictable?
100%. Same thing, right? If when we get to like the later parts of like program and you have compassion on somebody's page and 50 other people or 100 other people have compassion on the page, and you collate all those, which we've done, like we've asked people to give us our pages who are willing, and then we've gone on the off, we've been like anger, and here they all are, compassion, here they all are. The mind is thinking the exact same things, right? As an example, like something that just occurs when we feel compassion is like, oh, I like they've been through a lot. I have compassion for the pain in which they've endured. It's not their fault. It's like there's a specific intelligence that compassion drives. But we have to understand that isn't a mental intelligence, it's an emotional intelligence. Because every person that feels peace thinks in a similar way. Like when I feel peace, I go, oh, everything is okay. Everything's going to be all right. It is the way it's supposed to be, right? I'm connected to everybody. All is connected. It's like, no, those aren't just thoughts. It's like, no, that's just what naturally occurs as a byproduct of the literal intelligence of peace. So for me, emotions are consciousness, emotions are intelligence. And so it's like, which frequency are we going to learn to drive from? Are we going to drive from the intelligence and the frequency of peace, joy, inspiration? Or are we going to drive from the intelligence and the consciousness of anger or despair or insecurity? And then when we look at the aftermath of it, I've done this now with, tens of thousands of people and thousands of people just one-on-one. It's like, it's really amazing because like circumstances will evolve around a person's state. And so like for me, I was in these really challenging environments. I literally changed the experience I was having within the environment. And now I look around, my environment is completely different. Right. And so it's like the intelligence, sort of translates to the outcomes and results in our life.
I think Dr. Joe Dispenza had said this statement. So someone can fact check me on this, but you said, if you want to change your reality, you have to change your personality. Is that in essence kind of what you are talking about? Is that because your personality is in terms of how people experience you, and how people experience you is basically how your emotions are driving you. Is that fair? Is this fair?
Yeah. And I think so. Like I would take it a step further and I would say it's a byproduct of your consciousness, not necessarily your personality. Right. So it's similar and the same, but the reason I say that is because I think a lot of people, they think of personality as like an individual's attitude or the things that they're saying or the way they hold their body or what they think. Whereas me, it's like consciousness is the embodiment of the energy that we hold. right? Because like emotion at its core, I think of it as an energy. So if we are driving with the core energy of peace and inspiration a majority of the time, that's going to form our thinking and our belief matrix in a certain way. And then for sure, we're going to say things in a certain way. We're going to take action. But if we're not embodying the energy of the emotion, like if we're not embodying that consciousness, then the personality alone isn't necessarily gonna move the needle, if that sort of makes sense. But and again, I'm not familiar with Joe Dispenza's work. He might be defining personality in the way I think about consciousness, and then in that case, for sure, it's one and the same. But it really is about the energy we hold, right? And I'm not speaking of like that in an esoteric way. It's just very practical. Like if I'm in a room and I'm agitated, I'm putting out an energy. I'm like that's a frequency. That's an experience, not just with me, but an impact I'm having on other people. And when we're in a room and we feel, joyful, that's a different energy. That's a different presence.
Yeah, let's actually talk about that, right? Because someone listening to this goes, okay, that's great. I can have agency over my own emotions, right? My own attitude, my own like owning like where I'm at. How about someone who then goes, yeah, but I'm surrounded by fill in the blank. My company is filled with these type of people. Like my relationship is fill in the blank. Because I'm with you. I think this whole thing is energy game. The time is representation of how we allocate our energy, our activities, how we allocate our energy, right? Like, I mean, even our thoughts and our emotion, it's how we allocate our energy. How do we, I don't know if the right word is influence, or how do we actually change the energy around us?
We really do it by changing the energy we're bringing. We hold a different energy despite the environment. Now, I'm not saying it's not more challenging. Like heavier weights are being lifted for sure. Like when I talked about, like components of emotional resiliency, right? Like my ability to hold a inspirational state, or my ability to hold joy, or my ability to feel peace when my environment is challenging, requires a greater degree of training and skill set, right? Right? Practice. But it's just like heavier weights. It's 100% possible if I'm committed to doing it and I'm willing to train the mechanisms. And then what'll happen is one of two things. If you are in an environment, and I see this happen all the time, like I have a client, when I first started working with her, she was kind of like just got her first sales management position. She's making about 80 grand a year at a tech company. And she had a boss who was, you know, inappropriate, not great. And it was a hostile environment at this particular company. And she's like, do I go to HR? Do I turn them in? I go, well, I wouldn't recommend it. Like, you're going to nail this state when you go to work. And we got her to be able to show up there confident and inspired. And, she chose love, like having love for her team. And so like she showed up and she nailed that every day, even though there was not ideal circumstances going on. And, all of a sudden she had somebody, a recruiter, reach out to her and was like, hey, I'd like to give you this job over here at Google. And she took the job. And in 4 years, she went from like 80 grand a year and, that first kind of level of like sales management to basically almost a global VP level. And her next position will be $1 million a year, right? She's clearing about 600,000-700,000 a year. And her team and her upline, everybody loves her because she defines the space. But she's also able to get very different results than everybody else because she actually has everybody collaborative and working together, as opposed to what happens in a lot of corporate environments like this, where actually people are working against each other and there's only so many positions and everybody's competing and, all the things. And so she's operating a different way. And so her environment changed. Like, because she changed, she got taken into a new environment. Or like I had a guy who changed his environment. He worked at, IBM at the time. He changed his experience. He got fired very quickly after. He started showing up inspired, and like the culture was not the one that he was in, and he got fired. And he looked at his boss upon getting fired, and he had a big smile on his face. And his boss is like, "Are you okay?" And he's like, "Oh yeah." And she's like, "Why are you smiling?" And he's like, "Oh, because I understand that my conscious resonance no longer fits with this environment, and therefore I'm ready for my next thing. It's going to be better than what I'm in, and so I understand why you're letting me go. Thank you." And he left. Like he was like, he's probably the first person that was overjoyed to get let go But literally less than 6 months later, he had a pay raise. He was making twice as much as he made, and his next company was completely different than the one that he left. So like sometimes it's hard to like, this is where it gets a little esoteric for people sometimes. But when we understand energy dynamics, it makes perfect sense. It's like if we just understand at a micro level, when I was really upset and angry, I fit really well with my friends, right? And the hatred and the despair, like that was a particular environment, and that translated to drugs and alcohol and all things I was doing. When I literally started accessing like peace and joy and inspiration, those individuals didn't want to spend time with me anymore, right? They stopped calling. Matter of fact, they were upset at me for changing. And so literally I didn't fit there. There was no longer a resonance there. So sometimes your energy will change the environment around you. Sometimes the environment around you will opt you out. We've got to learn to trust the energy of who we are and who we are becoming. Now, again, it might be more challenging to hold that state in hostile environments or more challenging environments, but we can do it. And if we do, we'll either change our circumstances around us and we'll define a path, kind of like that example that I gave with the lady in her career. Or it might happen the other way where it's like you change who you are in the environment and you're no longer a fit there. So the environment will, in one way or another, opt you out.
Yeah.
But as I say, it's about learning to trust who we are and who we are becoming, less what we are doing.
Yeah, and in the environment, it just happens to be the additional weights, right? Like this gal that you're talking about, like her environment was just meant that she was having to pump some bigger iron.
Yeah, she had to be more consistent with her training. Like she did 2-a-days, right? She did her 20 minutes in the morning. Then when she got home, she did 20 minutes of the same training at night. So she was doing more reps to make sure that she was like prepared to hold the state in the environment. And the same thing happens like when I work with couples, and there are a lot of times people come to me as last resort and they're like, all right, you're a last resort. Like this either works, Joey, or we're divorced. And they're like, all right, let's get to work. And so like, yeah, you're going to probably need to put in a little more time. If you've created an environment of intensity and hostility, we're going to work a little harder maybe, or need to be a little more consistent to create the kind of change and hold our state in our space. But 9 of 10 is the ratio. Like when one person in the relationship shows up differently and holds a new energy, because we desire connection, that's our number one human desire, like the relationship transforms. And 1 of 10, the other person, again, lack of resonance, opts out. But the key is really understanding that we are the center of our world, our life, our reality, our universe. And this really does work in a very practical way the more we understand just emotion and energy dynamics. And when we really nail this for ourselves, what we come to realize is that your environment is a byproduct of you. And so if I look at my environment and my current circumstances today, I realize like, oh, all of this is a byproduct of my consciousness and who I am being. And so if I want something in my environment to change, I can evolve myself and my environment will conform to who I've become.
That is a mic drop moment right there. Like that is agency with a capital A. That is so powerful, Joey. I think that is so powerful. Man. So for our audience, one of the things as you're getting here, Joey has so generously shared is that this whole podcast, he's actually going to extend that generosity here. And so, Joey, I know you and I were talking before in the green room that you have an offer that I have to tell you if you're listening to this, that if you aren't sharing this episode so that they can hear the gifts of Joey, and that you don't take up Joey up on this offer, which by the way, spoiler alert, is free. Well, the only person you can blame is yourself, because he just gave you a whole lot of different examples of what winning looks like, and that like the gap between that and you right now is 2 millimeters. That's it. That's the biggest myth that you have. You got to go through all these turmoils and toils. That's just a myth, because Joe, you just outlined today, I think, one of the most concise formulas that I think I've ever heard. So, Joe, do you want to talk a little bit about your new book and what you're going to do for the audience, for the MaxLife podcast audience?
Sure thing. So we got Relationship Alchemy is my newest book out. 22 years of working with human beings in all forms of relationship, marriage, work relationship, right? Friendships, family dynamics, parents, children, work culture, right? All of it. And it's like, man, there are key things that if we show up and we do, we're going to break the relationship down. So let's name what those are and do less of that. And then there are key things that we do when relationships thrive. And so let's name what those are and put those to practice. And so that's basically what the book is like, hey, here are the core things we're going to do that are going to break relationship down. Here's how to see that we're doing them. Here's how to disengage them. Here's what we can do to make sure they thrive. Let's do these instead. And here's how we do it. So essentially that's the book in a nutshell. And again, like it's all come from like me in the trenches with people doing the things that I know work. And if it hasn't worked, literally hundreds of times over, me working with people one-on-one, and then at this point, thousands of people going through our programs, and it didn't make it into the book. Like what's in the book is directly from the seminars I put on and my one-on-one work with people. So it's all valid stuff, right? It's not an AI book. Like I got to say that now today because some people just write their AI book, right? This is all me and what we've seen work firsthand for people. So hopefully it'll be transformational. If they just go to joeyklein.com, joeyklein.com, it's right there on the front page. And if they purchase the book, they'll get access to what I call the Ghost in the Machine training or blind spot training. And basically it's 3 sessions with one of my top trainers, right? They get to basically work live with them one-on-one, and they'll go through 3 sessions teaching them skills like what we're talking about right now. They'll get a 20-minute training to do like we've been discussing. They'll have an action plan to apply. Session 1, they'll go through that. Session 2, they'll have a different one to do. Session 3, they'll have one to do. And usually my trainers charge $250 an hour for this. So it's like $750 plus the fee of the course. So it's a $750,000 product that we're just giving complimentary as long as they just let us know that they came from Ben Laws and the MaxLife podcast. So if they mention you, we'll get them all set up with one of our top trainers. We'll take them through that blind spot training, completely complimentary. And honestly, like for me, I just know what it meant when somebody gave me access to a vehicle that I can leverage to change my life. And so I just want to make sure, number one, we educate people about the difference we can make, give them an experience of that, make sure they leave those 3 sessions with an actual toolkit and some skills that they can apply in their life, regardless of what they choose to do from there. And it's also education, like learning what a transformational journey should look like and what are the mechanics that need to come together to make sure you set yourself up to succeed, whether ultimately they choose to do something more with us or they go find something else that's the right fit for them. I just want to educate and inform people.
Wow. Joey, thank you so much. That is so incredibly generous. And, 22 years of owning businesses and coaching people. I got to tell you, this is one of the most influential conversations that I think I've actually ever had. So I just, I want to say thank you. And in the audience, if you guys don't take Joey up on this offer, I just think that you're burning money. If you ever want to know what burning money looks like, you're burning joy, loving compassion, like you not taking action on it. That's what this is. Joey, one of the things I like my guests to do is give the last word. And so what do you want our audience to hear, see, feel, think about after this conversation today?
The word that popped in my mind is empowerment. Like give yourself permission to believe and have that hope in whatever you want for your life and what can be for yourself, and choose to take that empowered road for yourself to create the things in which you can imagine for yourself, because it's 100% possible. It all starts with just belief and the willingness to move and take action toward it.
Joey, thank you so much for being on the MaxLife podcast today. It was an absolute joy to have you.
Yeah, this was awesome being here. I appreciate everything, and we'll look forward to connecting soon.
Thank you for listening. A big thanks to Elation Lab for the production and creative design. Remember to like, subscribe, and follow us on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. Keep listening for more MaxLife.